Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Sabbath services. And what a week this has been. And everybody's been fixated on the Ukraine. And it's very interesting what is happening. The Russians are finding that the Ukrainians are not surrendering, but fighting. And they're fighting and holding them back in many places. And for most of the week, everyone was wondering why that major convoy of Russians coming down to the city of Kyiv was stalled. And it's been stalled almost all week. Well, they just released the pictures yesterday that the Ukrainians were smart enough to blow up the main bridge of that highway so they can't get across. And they've been successful in knocking out a lot of tanks. They have been able to kill a lot of Soviet soldiers, and they have killed over 600 of infiltrators that were sent in there by the Russians months and weeks in advance so that they could cause disruption in the Ukraine. And so it looks like it's going to be a giant mess. And that alarm that the nuclear reactor plant in southern Ukraine was set afire, that turned out to be not true. What caught fire was about 1,200 yards away, and it never affected the nuclear plant. Because if it did, then it would be a whole different situation for Russia and for the whole world. So America and different countries have been sending a lot of arms for the Ukrainians, and they're using them, and they're resisting. So we will see what happens with this. And if there's confusion thrown into the Russian ranks and their plans, well, then that's going to lead to the failure of the Russians. So we'll just have to wait and see. But one major thing has occurred because of the way that the Russians have conducted this affair. Because they expected all the Ukrainians to surrender and welcome them. Well, that was a major miscalculation. And what was the other major miscalculation? Something that will fulfill prophecy in a major way. Okay? That is, Putin has succeeded with his war on the Ukrainians to put absolute fear into all of the Europeans, and now they're going to unify. Even the Swedes and the Finns are going to become part of NATO. So that will be a major realignment of things which will fulfill prophecy, because the beast has to come out of the European alignment. And up to this point, it didn't look like it was going to be quite that way. And if the Russians succeeded the way some people thought they may have, then it would be another story altogether. See, Putin wants to go down in history as the one who restored the Soviet Union. And he wants to also get the Eastern European nations of Poland, Romania, Hungary, and some of the others to come back into the communist sphere of Russia. Okay? So, let's take a look. Let's take a look at here in Revelation 13. And we're going to see something else. Now, we know that in order for Satan to get his plan across, he's got to deceive the whole world. And we know that there is a great reset that they're trying to bring upon the whole world in economic terms, in social terms, and in private property terms. Okay? So, Trudeau in Canada proved one very important point. You can't force the people with the power of government. Now, he even threatened to close all of their bank accounts and confiscate their money. Well, that didn't go over so good. So right when he was ready to really put the clamps on, he dropped the emergency mandates. Now we're going to see that is a big lesson for the elite, and we'll talk about the elite. But what we're looking at in the world is this. Revelation 12:9, do you all know that one? Satan, the devil, is deceiving the whole world. Now, there's still enough people who are not willing to be deceived. So something else has to happen. So we'll look at that in a little bit. But let's see, in Revelation 13, the way this is going to come across is that the people will want it. So how are they going to do that? Okay, so let's read verse 1 here. And I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea. Now, what is sand and the sea? People, nations. Okay. And they have learned, those for the Great Reset have learned a big lesson in Canada. You can't do it with government force alone. And even the threat of economical force. Okay? So they're going to have the cooperation of the people. And where do we see this taking place now already with this Ukrainian thing? Ukrainians lining up by the thousands on the major roads leading into the Ukraine to stop the Russians from coming. Unarmed, carrying flags, singing songs, and the Russians had to spend a lot of time dispersing the people. But the people are going to be involved and have to be involved with what's going to happen in order for this final beast to come to the fore. And we'll talk about another element here in just a minute. Having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. Okay? The system that is against God. Now, I'll talk about this a little bit later when I cover some of the reports on the World Economic Forum. How many have heard of the World Economic Forum? Okay? Now, that is the major force which is bringing all of the super rich and the major corporations of the world and the bankers of the world together. And they meet every year in Davos, Switzerland. Okay? which is very interesting. What other city in Switzerland that will become a major player in the final solution here? And by the way, Switzerland now wants to join all the rest of the European countries. And up to this point in history, they have always remained independent. Okay? What's another major city in Switzerland? Geneva. What buildings are there that will add to this whole scenario? All the buildings built for the League of Nations, they're still there. And those were deeded to the United Nations. Now, is the United Nations going to move to Geneva now that Europe is looking like it has the foundation to come together? All nations in Europe. This is unheard of with Switzerland wanting to become part of it. Okay. So we'll just put a question mark out there and go on. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard, and his feet like the feet of a bear, his mouth the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority. So it has to be by the power of Satan the devil. Question. How many have watched all of the movies and videos about the rise and fall of the Third Reich and Hitler and so forth? Okay. There comes a point that Satan comes and personally possesses the leader. And that's what happened to Hitler. And look what happened. Okay? Because the dragon gives him his power, his throne, and great authority. Now then we see verse 3. And I saw one of his heads as if it were wounded to death. Now, you look at the system, the European system that Hitler was trying to put together. Okay? And Germany was going to be the main leader of it. Which, by the way, Germany just voted to increase, that is the German parliament, to increase defense spending and to produce whatever weapons they need to be prepared to fight off the Russians. See? Because they understand the Russians from this way. During Napoleon, Bismarck, First World War, Second World War, Russia was invaded. Mainly the German forces. And the Ukraine fits into that quite a bit too. Because during Hitler's time, when the German forces came into the Ukrainians welcomed him, joined his army, came up against the Soviets, and were fighting against them. So here we go with the Ukraine, again, right smack in the middle of a big war. Okay? So finally, they were able to push back the Germans, and they came with vengeance and destruction and leveling everything in sight. So you watch some of those videos that are on American History Channel and the conquering of Berlin by the Russians, they literally wasted it. And all the bombing that came from the Allies, they wasted Germany and brought it to its knees. One factory survived. Little sidebar. If you see the picture of what Hitler was trying to give the German people so they would support him, one of them was the people's car, the Volkswagen. Okay? So they had a number of the prototype models built, had a lot of propaganda with movies taking them so they could play them in the theaters and so forth. And this is what he promised them: a car in every garage. And he was building what we would call the freeways today. And that was to rapidly move the German forces to wherever they needed to go. Okay? So guess what factory survived all the bombings enough to where they could repair and start exporting? And what was one of the first exports that Germany was able to do to earn income to help build up their economy after the war? The Volkswagen. And they sold them in America, and I remember when they first came out, $2,300. And people were buying them like crazy, okay? Just a little sidebar. The deadly wound had to do with what happened to Germany and all of Europe. Was devastated, okay? Now, it says here, for the system, the deadly wound was healed. Okay? Now, Germany is the most prosperous and richest nation in Europe, and now they're dedicating their military inclinations to defenses. How many have seen the movie The Valkyrie? Okay? Well, The Valkyrie was about the Germans who had plotted to assassinate Hitler. And it was quite extensive. There were a lot of top military men involved, and one of the man who took the bomb into the meeting where Hitler was going to be put it on the wrong side of a thick, here's a table, and they had a thick oak leg that went all the way across the width of the table. Hitler was on this side, and they put the bomb on this side. Well, bomb went off. Good number of them died, but Hitler survived. Now, this was a little over a year before the final surrender of the Germans. But Germany, after the war, to show how peaceful that they wanted to be, have a special ceremony for the Valkyrie every year, honoring those who sought to assassinate Hitler. And this was to show that we're peaceful. So it makes you wonder What's going to happen in Germany? Okay. Now continuing, and the whole earth was amazed and followed the beast. Now that's yet to come. So we don't know exactly what's going to happen in the two phases of the beast. The man who will be the leader, and all of Europe united together. Okay. But that will be amazing when that takes place. Now notice, and they worshiped the dragon. That's the missing element in trying to bring the Great Reset. They can't do it politically. They can't do it with a police state because there's too much resistance. People will not go for it. They won't go for it even in the face of war, as you can see by how the Ukrainians are resisting the Russians. So, there has to be the religious aspect that comes to play in bringing the whole beast power together. Now, I'll talk about that in just a bit. And they worship the beast, okay? It's like they did. Did they worship Hitler? Oh, yes, indeed. But he's going to be better than Hitler, stronger than Hitler. Saying, who's like the beast, who has the power to make war against him? Now, what does that statement mean? That means that you have to have armaments so that no one wants to make war against you. Now, how's that going to happen? You've heard of the cyclotron in CERN, Switzerland, right? Guess who most of the scientists are working on that cyclotron, where they're trying to find the powerful, invisible particles, so they say, to understand how the earth is made. Okay, plus other things. So it's a collider. Okay. That's one of the biggest projects in the world. Scientists have been working on it for decades now. So I'm going to ring my bell, okay? Could it be that these scientists will discover something that will be absolutely amazing, which then will be potentially so powerful that no one wants to make war against him? Okay? So you need to think on that. Okay? And a mouth speaking great things, and blasphemy was given to him, and authority was given to him to continue for 42 months. Because it starts out as 7 years or 84 months. And in the middle, you see, that's when that deadly wound happens again to the man, and he's revived, okay? And he continues 42 months. Now let's see how powerful this is going to be. And he opened his mouth and blasphemed against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and those who dwell in heaven. And he was given power to make war against the saints. So this shows you something here. The church is going to have to be very active in preaching the gospel. So we don't know how that's going to happen or how God is going to make it possible, but he will, and overcome them. And he was given authority over every tribe and language and nation. That's where it's going to come to. And all who dwell on the earth will worship him, whose names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. All right? Now then, another little sidebar on the Messiah that the Jews are expecting. They are not expecting Christ to return as God from heaven because they've rejected him. So this man will be thought of as the manifestation of God on the earth. And the Jews will accept him until he goes into the temple to say he's God. Now, is that when a deadly wound happens to the man and he's healed? And let's see how he is healed here in just a minute. Okay? We don't know. But we know for sure, because Jesus said the tribulation will not begin until the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stands in the holy place. And that's the coming temple. So all of these things have to come together. These are all parts of what's going to be the finale of the last 7 years. Now here's the missing ingredient. Let's finish this off first, okay? If anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone gathers into captivity, he shall go into captivity. If anyone kills with the sword, he must be killed with the sword. Here is the endurance and patience of the saints. Now it talks about the saints twice. So we'll have to see how all of that works out, okay? Now here's the key. Here is the key right here. And I saw another beast rising out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, but spoke like a dragon. This is how the people of the earth will be brought into the system through the religions of the world. And he exercises all the authority of the first beast before him. Now, that's over the whole world. So in order for that beast system to work, you've got to have the leader of the government, and you must have the leader of all religions. And if you have, like it is today, all the Catholics, they'll be in it. Nearly all the Protestants, they'll be in it. Nearly all the Orthodox, they'll be in it. Plus the Buddhist and the Islamist. They will all be a part. Remember the sermons that I've given covering how they are cooperating with the religions. All right? So, here we go. The church has become a vehicle to implement the New World Order. Now that's something, okay? Let me read just a little bit here, okay? Now, all of this has been going on since Woodrow Wilson, and beginning with the Federal Reserve, and all of these things dovetail together. And they're going to get together to create a global organization based upon an ecumenical spirit of unity, clearly the legacy of the original progressive clergy. Okay. Now then, he lists all of the Christian progressive clergy. Now, we're not aware of hardly of any of this. This is quite a revelation. And when did they begin? Well, American Society for International Law, 1906. National Arbitration and Peace Conference, 907. Methodist Federation for Social Action, 1907. Federal Council of Churches of Christ in America, 1908. American Society for the Judicial Settlement of International Disputes, 1910. World Alliance for International Friendship, 1914. All of these are still ongoing organizations. Church Peace Union, 1914. American League to Limit Armaments, 1914. American Union Against Militarism, 1915. League to Enforce Peace, 1915. Committee on Moral Aims of War, 1919. International Missionary Council, 1921. Universal Conference on Life and Work, 1925. Faith and Order Movement, 1927. All of these organizations, plus, as I pointed out last week about with the new Revised Standard Version, everything in the Bible has been reoriented to the group instead of individual salvation. Okay. Many of these organizations were merely the outworking of private foundations and their wealth, most particularly the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, Rockefeller Brothers Fund, and Ford Foundation. And these are describes the function of many American foundations that sprang up in the early 20th century. How are we seeing this manifest today? Wokeism with the corporations. Okay? So, the change agents of yesterday and in the present understand that if a culture is to shift to a permanent way, then social values must move gradually until a tipping point is reached. Have we reached that? We're probably beyond it. Remember what happened when the AIDS epidemic came out? You probably never heard of this. The leading homosexuals and their organizations got together, and like all good, evil people, they never waste a crisis. So they figured out, in conjunction with the media, to have the people have sympathy for these poor homosexuals who got AIDS. Okay? Then that opened the door for people to begin practicing what was in a very famous book back in the 1970s, which was a book entitled, I'm Okay, You're Okay. Now, what did that philosophy do, which is rampant today? Okay? If you're a homosexual, that's okay. All right? If I'm religious, that's okay. If you're an atheist, that's okay. We'll all get along together. Now, look at what we have today. Look where the society in America is today because of that very thing. See? Now, they tried in America with this woke movement to begin to enforce some of these things that we've talked about for the whole change of system and redirection of the world. Okay? But there's still enough people around against them that the world leaders can see that their plan cannot be implemented now. So they're going to have to bring in the religion. What has happened in the religion? Well, you have homosexual churches who believe in Jesus. Okay? Look at the morals. And they were surprised when they had different groups get together. Remember here in California, they had the Great Smoke-In? What was that? That was a movement to legalize marijuana. So all the people got together and they all lit up their joints, and there was a great cloud of smoke, was covered by the media, and it put the politicians into position that if we go against marijuana, we won't stay in office. Okay? Now then, they've done the same thing with drugs. Look at drugs. Look what they're doing in San Francisco. And they're carrying out the work of the Chinese who want to drug America. And you read what they are doing. See? You look at the reports on fentanyl that comes into America. Fentanyl is deadly. There are more deaths because of drug overdoses. People are into all kinds of drugs. And that takes away your thinking. That takes away your responsibility. That takes away your will to resist. And so that's all a part of it, okay? So let me just finish here, okay? For this tipping point to occur, institutional hubs must first be altered within. That's happened in education. That's happened in government, right? That's happened in religion, correct? Yes. The educational system, media, popular culture. The media is nothing but the psychological arm of this movement, see? So what we're looking at in Europe right now is the major thing that happened was bringing all of Europe together. That is major. All of these other things have been taking place, okay? Now let me continue here. Media, popular culture, religious organizations, and other key societal crossroads need to embrace the new worldview that top-down change agents reforming our society, political institutions, they're not difficult to discover. Now then, let's look at the aims of the Great Reset. I want to show you a picture of a man, Klaus Schmidt. He's the head of the World Economic Forum, and he has many people working with him and under him, and he is a communist called a socialist. And in Germany, he's one of the most powerful men around. And if you can look carefully at the picture, you will see that behind him there is a bust of guess who? Lenin. So this is what is coming, okay? A little bit more on it, okay? Now here are the things that they're using to get it in. Number one, climate change is the bedrock, okay? They used the pandemic was justification to begin the world experiment of ushering in a global institutional change. They didn't succeed, but that doesn't mean they're going to stop. Digital passports, all-seeing eye, building a global social presence barometer for each human, ultimately a rating system of how you will be controlled or punished if you do not adhere to the system. This is exactly what the Chinese have. And look at all of the major international corporations that are in on wanting the China system because they want business in China. See? Plus, access to your digital bank account to further cement control over your behavior. Okay? Modern monetary theory. Because when this comes about, it's going to be something. And the masses of people that demanded this and wanted it to come in and accepted it, it's going to have the mark of the beast come, right? Okay? Modern monetary theory, defiance of all same rules to maintain balance between income and spending with ultimately useless fiat money. Number 4, you own nothing. Everybody rents from the state. Then they want to move to vegetarianism if possible. And then everything's going to be based on the ESG, the environmental, social, and governance. Okay? Now then, let's come back to Revelation 13. This is why the religions of the world have to be in on this. So when we see something big, like is happening in the Ukraine, there are greater goals out beyond that are going to take place. And this was a phenomenal, quick switch of bringing Europe together. Happened overnight. You couldn't have done it without the Ukraine war. Okay? Now, let's see what happens with the papacy. Let's see what happens with the religions of the world. Okay? Let's read it. Spoke like a dragon. Exercises all the authority of the first beast before him. They go together. Won't that be spectacular? The Pope and the world ruler together. Okay? And he causes the earth and all who dwell therein to worship the first beast and be obedient to him. Because they will help the people put down all resistance and fighting against this world system. The Great Reset. And I'll have more to say about that later on as we go down through time. Whose deadly wound was healed. And he performs great wonders. Now think about that. This is going to be awe-inspiring. And everybody's going to see it. Just like we have today. You can see what's going on in the Ukraine and hear people talking who are living through it, explaining what is happening in the middle of this war. Okay? So that he even causes fire to come down to the earth from heaven in the sight of men. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth by the means of the wonders that were given to him to perform in the sight of the beast, saying to those who dwell on the earth that they should make an image for the beast, which had the wound by the sword, yet was alive. That's part of the whole idolatry system. So he will be declared Christ in the flesh. Now, why is that necessary? Because when Christ does come, all the nations of the earth are going to be deceived into thinking that this is an invasion from outer space and we must all get together and save the earth. And the leading nation behind that is going to be China and the nations of the East and all the rest of the nations together to come and fight against Christ. So here we are, right on the threshold, right on the cusp, seeing these things all come together. So this is the main thing that has occurred. Putin has united Europe, and he doesn't even understand what he has done. We'll take a break, and we'll come back in 20.